what's up, guys? We're back again with our second live stream of the day, and it's another live stream for those of you guys watching us on YouTube. I'm your host, Alex Blonsky, and today we are going to do basically a competitive boot camp for people that have never played competitive Insurgency before, with my guest, Procaster, and I guess pro player, LordQuode. Say hi.
Hey
buddy.
there, guys.
Hey.
Nice to meet all you guys.
So first, give me a little bit of background of yourself, like how you got into Insurgency and how you got into like competitive and casting and that sort of thing.
All right, so I started playing Insurgency shortly after the Spring Molotov update, which, if I recall correctly, I believe the purchase date on the game is somewhere around like May of 2014, somewhere around there. And if that's incorrect, then well, I'm wrong. But I got into the game because it was on sale and it looked like an interesting shooter. Got into it because I was tired of kind of the other games that were in the FPS genre at the time, and I just started playing it as a normal player. I just started playing in the public servers. I had a natural inclination for the tactical operations where it's single life entities unless your team captures an objective. I was drawn to the team play of the game and the no hand holding that comes with that. And then once the DGL formed, I was quickly picked up and recruited by various teams, the first of which was a team called Dayrey, and I participated with them in DGL Season 2 as a reserve.
Oh, early on.
early on in the DGL.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was a reserve, and then that's where it started for me. And then it just kind of, once you get started with it, and you know, the passion takes over, and you end up kind of keeping tabs with it even if real life takes over. So I participated in 3 seasons total. I participated in DGL seasons 2, 5, and 6, winning the Division 2 championship in season 6 with the team S3, Team 2. And then after that, I kind of took on more of a coaching role because there were a lot of newer players and a lot of my friends had moved on to either different titles or real life stuff. And so I still wanted to give back to the community that gave me so much entertainment, and so I turned into more of like a coach slash tutor sort of role, I guess you could say. And I still occasionally sub in for teams if they need a filler.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to have you on. I know that you're doing like a lot of streaming lately. How many hours are you doing a day now?
I average anywhere between 3. Usually the lowest streams are usually around 2 hours, just because sometimes it takes a while to get pickup games started or just to find a pop-in server. But I usually stream anywhere between 3 and 6 hours a day after I get off work, just because this is the shooter I play, so I might as well stream it while I play it.
So yeah, I wanted to get everybody on today for kind of like a basic session into what competitive is. What's the big differences between competitive and the other modes, and kind of like the loadouts and how to play it, simply because it's a game mode that we're going to be adding as kind of like stock inside of Insurgency Sandstorm, and a lot of like the skills and the stuff you learn here carry over to Sandstorm as well. And frankly, it is like the way that people are going to be ranked and that sort of thing as well. So getting good right now at Firefight and that style of gameplay is going to translate into Sandstorm eventually. So I wanted to bring you on so that we get kind of like a overview on how that mode differs and what the kind of meta is right now, and hopefully that'll carry over to Sandstorm as well. So I wanted to start with like the overall game right now. Like what is the biggest difference between this mode and if you go into like any pub, let's say skirmish server or that sort of thing?
So the biggest difference between this competitive game mode and in your public skirmish is, first of all, that you don't get any sort of respawn waves. So if you're familiar, if you play primarily the tactical game modes of ambush and or pub firefight, you only get 1 life. The way that you'll notice that there are 3 objectives on the map for every single firefight map, and you have to cap one of either a neutral objective, which is the middle B objective at the start, or a hostile objective in order for your team to spawn back in. So that creates this this sense of urgency to get to the objectives, because obviously you don't want to lose your objective and give the enemy team respawn, and you also don't want to, you know, waste your life trying to take an objective if your team isn't going to be in a position to execute well on that and bring you back in should you die in the attempt. And it creates this really interesting it's a lot more intense because you don't have as many bodies to absorb or draw attention. So in a public server, for example, what'll tend to happen is a lot of players, kind of like lemmings. That's the only phrase or analogy I can come up with that kind of fits what happens in public servers, where when one player does well in a lane, everybody on that player's team will follow them, and so you have these large masses of players that are running down like highly trafficked lanes on the map towards objectives. And when I say lanes, I'm just referring to like routes. So for example, from spawn, every single lane starts from the opposing, like each spawn. So because in Insurgency the spawn points are set, there's bigger zones, like the primary lane, a lane from security, which is the team we're on right now for this map. If we were to leave spawn and run down the river, this river leads you not only to Bravo but to the Alpha objective, and this is that would be considered, in the broadest sense of the word, that would be considered a lane. And in public servers, you'll have a lot of teammates running this way, and you kind of have that security in numbers because there's a possibility that your teammate might get picked instead of you. Maybe you're faster than your teammates, maybe they're just, you know, in between you and the person shooting at you. Whereas in the 5v5, you don't have bodies to absorb those shots. So movement is very, very risky. It's very treacherous in this version, in this game mode, versus like a public server.
Right, and I think it's probably a lot more important to, let's say, defend a lane instead of constantly push, which you tend to find on public servers especially.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
So in terms of like loadouts and that sort of thing, like if I go back into my my kit screen, what is kind of like the meta right now for competitive in terms of loadouts?
So most competitive players, you'll notice that the points for primary and second, you'll notice that first of all, the secondary weapon doesn't cost any points whatsoever. So, and the reason for that is because in competitive, there are a lot of times where you get in gun engagements with one opponent and another opponent is flanking, and you don't have time to reload your primary in order to like address the second threat. So in the competitive theater, all secondaries cost 0 supply points. That way, there's no need for a player to force a reload on their primary just to have a chance of surviving an engagement with multiple enemies. That's like, I think, the major thing that a lot of people will see. Another thing that you'll see is that most competitive players will use, especially on the security side, they'll use the high penetration semi-auto rifles, unless they're wanting to flank, in which case they'll use the fully automatic M4 or the MP5K for the rates of fire that they offer. And then usually they'll carry at least 2 grenades. If they can, they'll use a frag grenade and or a smoke or a flash, whatever their purpose is for the team. And for every weapon that they have points for, they will use AP ammo. And the reason for that is because although armor doesn't save you if somebody is spraying full auto and they hit 4 bullets, AP reduces the time to kill drastically if you're hitting them in the body, which is where most competitive players aim. And so it kind of negates the use of armor, because armor also weighs you down considerably, and as I just stated, movement is very, very treacherous, and you need to be able to traverse the map as quickly as possible.
And I've seen like as opposed to a normal game where you see a lot of guys using scopes and sights and that sort of thing, suppressors. I've seen laser sights. I've seen one guy rock a flashlight in a recent game I played. Mm-hmm. What type of like attachments do people end up using, or do they use them at all?
So most competitive players do not use scopes whatsoever. The reason being is because the draw time, or your time to ADS or aim down sight, is drastically increased with optics. Even if you're using a 1X, such as the red dot, Cobra, Hollow, all 3 of those 1x's increase your ADS time, which in a game of milliseconds and where the time to kill is 1 bullet, that's important. Those milliseconds matter crucially. You'll see a lot of comp players opt for foregrip if they're doing a lot of long-range engagements. So let me just kill myself real quick and go back to spawn. That way I can kind of show you what I mean by that. So with the M16, because of the cost of it, I'm usually able to do a lot of... I can dedicate 2 points to AP ammo, 2 points to foregrip, and then I like to get a flashlight on my primary, and the reason for that is because when you're in a very, very close quarters engagement, so for example, as I'm running up to this corner, let's just say that I know that there's an enemy that's at the bottom of these stairs right here, right? So one benefit of having a flashlight that some competitive players use, especially on the darker maps, is they'll actually have their flashlight off, and as they approach the angle and they know there's an enemy there, they'll turn the flashlight on, peek, and then pre-fire. And that flashlight, because of how wide the range of the lens is, it can momentarily... It can disorient the person you're shooting at.
Right.
And it could give you a chance to get that pre-fire in. The foregrip also provides a big reduction in recoil. So if I'm over here at tree, for example, and I know that there's a player upper Charlie, the Firefight Charlie, the doorway that I'm kind of looking at right there, the moment I see any sort of shadow outline, I can pre-fire, and then although the lean makes it difficult to maintain that angle and keep the recoil, the foregrip makes it a lot easier to control it.
And in terms of like armor and that sort of thing, what scenarios would you pick specific armor types?
So actually, I can actually show you a good one right now. I'm going to change the map to show this because it's a very common thing now. It used to be the meta was nobody wore armor whatsoever because it weighed you down, and you can still die in like 2 bullets if somebody like flanks you.
Right.
However, let me just change the map real quick. Okay, so for example, but the reason why armor isn't used, like I said, because you can still die really fast. Sorry, I had to remember that line of command. But recently what's been happening is on objectives or lanes where it takes a little bit of time to get there anyways, and teams have decided that it's not worth pushing through those specific areas. They'd rather hold it, such as apartments here on the district. Whoever is playing apartments, it doesn't matter who the player is, what's turning into meta now. So normally in apartments, you get to the windows that from both security side and insurgent side, that's usually where they meet up. And it's very common to have a lot of pre-fires happen, because like I said, everybody uses AP in their primaries, whether it's the AK, the M16, M4, or the AK-74. So, and the reason why AP is important is because you can penetrate the windows up here in apartments from either side, and both sides have the potential to kill one another if they're not wearing armor. However, the benefit that armor offers is that, so it's, let's say that I'm standing here behind the wall and I'm covering apartment hallway. If there's a player over here across the way on the window, if they're over here in the window and they see me jump across, they know that I'm going to be near this windowsill. Normally, if I don't have armor, they can pre-fire that wall, and because they're firing directly at it, almost perfectly perpendicular, and they're using AP, it'll kill me standing there within like 2 or 3 bullets still. And as you saw with my rate of fire, most of the players have like really quick, trigger fingers. So those 3 bullets go really quick, and if you're just sitting here, you're already hit twice before you're even aware you're getting hit. And heavy armor just kind of gives you that extra bit of survivability in those situations.
And that would come at the cost of, I would guess, movement speed, right?
Correct. Or a grenade. I mean, it definitely comes at the cost of movement speed. Most players will sacrifice a grenade or a weapon attachment such as foregrip. That way they can afford the heavy armor.
And now you were talking before about, well, you mentioned apartments, right? And so I think that the one thing that people have not experienced on any of the maps when they play them in public servers are the names of some of these areas of the map. They're called usually callouts inside of the gym or inside of the BTL. But what are some of the, like, on this map specifically, what are some of like the best like lanes and like the names for them on this map? I know apartments is one. Tires people talk about. Like there's a bunch of specific callouts that people talk about all the time, and I want to try to like get an overview without getting way too deep into every single one on the map.
Okay, yeah, so in general, so you notice I went ahead and enabled no clip, that way I can traverse the map a little quicker. So so right off the bat, the objectives are what all of these lanes are based off of. So you have A, B, and C, and all of these lanes, these primary lanes, are going to show you the reason why they're even named in the first place is because they're highly trafficked, and they're also considered anchor spots where players can sit down and they don't have to be on the objective to necessarily defend it. So going off of that, I'll start off just here in Alpha. So if I'm here inside of Alpha, what are the main areas? So security starts off defending this objective. The main points of entry are going to be from the front, which comes from either this is called ice cream because of the little cooler that's right here. So this little lower area is called ice cream. This feeds directly into Alpha, and then you also have this area over here, which is called A alley, because I mean, let's be honest, if you found this location in real life, would you walk down this at night? The answer is no. The answer is no. You would not walk down this alley at night. So those are the two. I mean, those are two major lanes. There's obviously smaller callouts, but those are, you know, those have names because they are direct lines of sight into the objective. If we leave Alpha and we want to go to Bravo, which this point right here, which is right in the perfect center of everything, is Bravo. If we're headed to Bravo from Alpha, the quickest way is, so like if I leave from the front of Alpha, I can go over here, which could bring me into an engagement with insurgents. We call this area right here cafe because of the kind of, you know, the little fridge, little chairs and tables here. It kind of resembles what you would see, you know, at a, you know, like a cafe overseas. Right. And that cafe leads onto patio again because you kind of have little awnings here. You have again more seating for your restaurant, and it leads you right onto Bravo. The alternative. So I'll go back out through cafe here, back out towards A. The alternative to that is obviously to come to where there's a little more cover and come through arches. It's a very simple call out. There's security arches and then there's insurgent arches over on the opposite end. But you can come through arches and you're just perfectly on Bravo. And then you can pretty much sit on this little stall right here on this little trash bags. And you'll see, because the entire enemy team is going to be spawning at the beginning of the round, at least the entire enemy team will be coming from here. You know, the only thing you have to worry about is getting flanked from one of these other angles. But as you can see, there's no real clear line of sight, you know, if you get through arches and onto the objective. So that's so arches and cafe are major areas. These stairs lead up to what's called balcony, and it's just because it's an elevated, free roaming kind of space where pretty much anybody can see Bravo or into apartments from. It's a really powerful position. Pretty much every team plays balcony. Pretty much every team plays apartments. Right. And you know, if you leave Bravo and we go towards Charlie, which is in this building right here, this entire little section here is Charlie. If you were to leave Bravo to go to Charlie, you would have to come up here. We call this section cubby, just because there's this nice little hidey hole right here where you can have your back and really nobody can see you. And then you would leave cubby, come through what's called workshop, just because of the shelves here, kind of resembles like an auto parts store. And you would go through workshop, go straight to Charlie. So, and then the opposing lane from that, obviously, so we have security arches. If we were to leave Bravo to go to C and we went through insurgent arches, we could go straight to Charlie through there, or we could come through Barber. So Barber, because
looks like a barber shop. Yeah,
it looks like a barber shop. So I mean, you can tell that there was a lot of, you know, creative thought process put into these callouts. You just go through Barber, and then you can come into Charlie through the rear. And those are the main lanes.
So I know something important when I've played Firefight before is to get to those specific lanes as quickly as possible. So when you're walking in like in a group of 5 and that sort of thing, what should you do to make sure that you're not let's say slowing your team down or get to your lane as quickly as possible? Because it seems establishing a position at some of these specific call-out areas is very important, and to get there quickly is very important too.
Yeah. So general tips are going to be similar to the kind of referencing back to the meta. Nobody wears armor unless they plan on not moving for a long time. Armor is one of the most weightiest things that you can equip, and unless you're playing very, very powerful cover positions, it really won't do you any good. So if a player is wanting to be faster, you want to remove armor completely, because light armor doesn't benefit you security players. I know it's free, but it really doesn't benefit you at all. And then heavy armor, again, is a very circumstantial tool, and you're still going to die if someone is, firing at you like nude without cover. So I would remove your armor. I would reduce, because a lot of people make the mistake of thinking they need as many magazines as possible for their guns. And so a lot of public players love to use the chest rig and the chest carrier.
Yep.
Honestly, if you use 3 magazines in a life, I think you've done a good amount of work as far as suppressing or getting kills. If you're getting kills with those bullets as well, then 3 magazines, which is what you get for your primary if you don't use a chest rig or a chest carrier. 3 magazines is all you need, especially if you're using a rifle that comes with 20 bullets in a magazine or 30 bullets in a magazine. You shouldn't be shooting that much and missing, because the chest rig and the chest carrier weigh you down immensely. And if I could count how many pubbies that I can see wearing the chest rigs in these public servers and dying without even shooting more than 5 bullets,
yeah,
honestly, like, it would account for more hours than I have in this game, and I have a lot of hours in this game. So,
yeah, I know that I started out doing it too, and then when I realized, especially when you're a new player and you start, like, if you're not dying in the first minute, your team has probably won that round. The rounds are so fast, especially in competitive, that yeah, you're not gonna go through 5 clips or something like that.
Yeah, it's very unlikely. In some of the sustained game modes, there can be arguments made against that, but in this game mode especially, like you said, the only guaranteed time you have where there's not going to be an enemy around the corner is the first 15 seconds of the round. So remember how when we were on the previous map, Heights, I mentioned how it's so important that both the spawn points are set for both teams? That's super important because at the beginning of the round, you know where the enemy is. Right. For a certain amount of time. So those positions, those lanes, you need to have eyes on those as quickly as possible. It doesn't matter which of your teammates is there. It doesn't matter who is better where. As long as those lanes are covered as quickly as possible, you'll be able to have information on what's happening. Because, like I said, after 20 seconds, 30 seconds into the round, you can have somebody that's already on your side of the map if you're not watching the correct lanes. And that's where a lot of public players, and I don't want to say public players because there are a lot of public players that use sound cues, and so they hear somebody coming up real fast, and so they slow up and manage to correctly peek and get kills. Like, they have good natural game sense. But there are a lot of other public players that they start playing Firefight or they start playing PvP coming from co-op, where obviously you're used to bots spawning around every single little corner, and so you approach it with caution because you want to be able to ADS, draw your pistol, whatever, and kill the bot. But when you're playing against players, especially on this game mode, it's not, you don't have that. And I see a lot of public players playing slow because they expect an enemy around every single corner.
Right. And I think it's something that you will get used to over time, especially when you do play these lanes and knowing where guys get to at the same time you kind of arrive at that location, whether they play back or whether they push in, that sort of thing. And it's kind of like a push and pull in every lane. You can run in early and pre-fire early or throw early pre-nades and that sort of thing. But you can also hang back a little bit and see if that person will try to push through and kind of slow down a bit. So it seems like there's multiple strategies that can be used in every lane.
And you're correct, there are. A lot of players, a lot of teams, I would say, give each other a fair amount of respect towards mid and late game. Different teams have different starting strategies. Because Firefight starts with a neutral objective on every single map, the primary focus of every team is to have control of the neutral objective.
Yeah.
So
that's B is a big point in every one of these games, especially. Just
Correct.
Because the value of it is respawning the dead players on your team.
And it's not just that. Because of every single map is designed with B being the this is the bottleneck. So even on the bigger maps like Market, the Bravo objective, every single area of the map has a lane or route that feeds directly into Bravo. So if you control Bravo, you essentially cut off half of the map from the enemy, because you can see so much if you're controlling, the various points of it. You can have one player that's not even right on Bravo. Like I said, you could have control of Bravo, and time is running out, and you already have a player that's guarding Alpha, and you're by yourself up here on balcony. But like I said before, from here, you can see all of Bravo.
Right.
And not only all of Bravo, you can see every entrance onto it. You can see if they enter from arches. You can see if they enter from Cubby, from Workshop, from Cafe, and from your arch even. And this is just from one spot. And there are several spots like this. Like every spot can see each other. And this District is the only map that does that. That's why Bravo is so important for any team, whether you're wanting to play aggressive or slow.
Yeah, and I think Bravo on every one of our maps is kind of usually in the center of the map, and there's everything feeds into it in that case, because there's all sorts of lanes that kind of feed into it. But I wanted to ask you about objectives and kind of the strategy about taking objectives, or sometimes even stalling an objective. What are the strategies behind getting on an objective? When would you want to get on an objective versus stay in your lane and that sort of thing?
Okay, so thanks Lone for the follow. I appreciate it, brother. So I always explain to people that Firefight, you can win it in 3 different ways. The first way is the simplest way, which is to control all 3 objectives. And the reason I say it's the simplest is because that's the simplest to explain. People understand that. You control the entire map, you win the round. However, that is a much more difficult task when you only have 5 players to do it with, and you're against 5 other players that have really good reaction speed and really good aim.
Yeah.
So the 2 more common ways that Firefight is won is A, by controlling map majority and letting the time run out. This is favored by teams who like to play slower. So these are teams that they're not going to be as aggressive right off the bat. They're going to aim to kind of catch the enemy team as they flank, or catch the enemy team as they push onto Bravo, or even push their home, like your starting objective, and get those kills, and then move on to Bravo and then control it. That way they have 2 out of 3, and they let the timer run to 0. So, and because in competitive Firefight, the round times are significantly shorter, like you mentioned, it's a faster game. Rounds are only 2 minutes.
Yep.
And versus on your public server, I think the lowest round time on a public server I've seen is 5 minutes, and that's for I think that's a 24-man server.
Right.
A 24-man Firefight server. So that's a 12v12, and it's a long time to work with. And 2 minutes isn't a lot of time to work with when you have maps as big as District or Market or Heights. So that's the second way that people win Firefight, is by just controlling majority of the map and letting the time run out. And then the third way is the most fun way, I think, which is just killing the whole enemy team.
Right.
So this favors aggressive players because, like I said, you don't spawn back in unless your team caps an objective. But if you kill the entire enemy team before they can cap an objective, then you win.
Right.
It's over. And so it's all about all the competitive teams that play work in a balance as far as measuring which of those 3 winning conditions they have the best chance of getting.
Right.
On a round-to-round basis.
And that would be something that's usually talked about before the game starts or before the round starts, correct?
Normally before the round, because most teams don't actually go into matches with set So every team has what I like to call the foundation strat. This is their default. So they'll start off every single match playing this particular way, but every team will adapt to what the other team is doing as the match progresses. So it's a round-to-round thing. So if you lose a round because you got flanked from an angle you weren't expecting and your entire team got killed, you can choose to address that either by being a little more passive and trying to catch them as they flank, or by outflanking them and capping your team back in at the right time.
Right, and I've seen that before where like a team will bring an objective to, let's say, 90%, and then they'll step off and then wait until like maybe another guy dies because they can basically push more aggressively, and then the guy that's safe on that objective, those 90%, caps the rest of the objective and brings his player back.
Correct, and it's and that delayed cap is a common tactic by teams that, you know, they want to play fast, they want to keep the aggression, high octane, momentum, speed. No, sorry, wait, that's the wrong streamer. My bad. No, so they, but yeah, so a lot of teams they don't want to waste the cap, because if you have 5 people up and you waste the cap, especially the neutral objective, the B objective, it makes it easier for the other team to cap, because with the objective neutral, it has to go both ways. It can go both ways, and neither team controls it. But when your team captures it fully, that resets it to where it's now like you're now defending that objective, and the other team, instead of having to fully decap the progress you've made on the objective and then cap it in their favor, now they just have to cap it in their favor in order to get their spawn back. So if you have a man advantage, there's no sense in you capping the neutral objective and giving the enemy team an easier chance to bring their team back in.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. For players that are, let's say, new to like 5-on-5 firefight, what are kind of like the specific, let's say just on this map, what are the kind of specific positions or lanes that you should start out learning? We looked at like the lanes in general and some of those positions, but what's a good one for a newer player?
Okay, so for a newer player, most newer players are, whether you're playing in pickup games or in like actual teams, like for those of you who are looking at starting teams or joining established teams, most often the quickest way for a player to get acclimated to the game mode is actually playing what we like to call B-bitch. So this is literally just the direct lane and the primary lanes onto Bravo itself. And the reason why this happens to newer players is because A, it forces you to like observe, and like it puts you in the pressure situation, like you're in the center of the mess.
Right.
But what it also gives you a chance to do is it gives you a chance to get used to where all you can get shot from. B players have a really low KD, generally speaking, but because they get so much cap progress on Bravo, they usually get a high score at the end of the game, because they're playing a very crucial role in forcing the other team to get them off of the objective. And so that brings people out of cover, that brings their teammates kills. It's a very good starting position, because whenever they leave Bravo, they start to learn the lanes better, because you know they have to survive Bravo first. As they survive attacks from all these different lanes, they then survive Bravo, and then from there they think to themselves, wait, where do I go from here? And then they're able to explore these other lanes. And that's why most new players, if you start off, like, you're gonna die a lot.
Right.
Like, that's just a part of the learning process in this game. But starting off in the center of the mess, and then just identifying where all you get shot from and trying to perform as best as you can with your team, that'll get you the best results. All these other routes, although they're very powerful flanking positions, if you're a player that is of sound enough mind and has the tactical timing, positioning, and strategic planning to carry out the flanks necessary, then I mean, you're really not missing anything. Like, you're not really going to learn anything by just playing, Bravo. I mean, you'll probably get acclimated to the game mode very quickly if you already understand those modes. But for new players, playing Bravo is definitely the best way to get a jump start on experience.
One interesting thing that I've noticed when spectating and when playing games is if you are the last person left, or maybe last 2 left, and they have 5 still, whether and the other team is capping, whether or not you go for, let's say, like a spawn camp on their team when their team respawns or respawns. Or whether or not you go to, let's say, what you think is the farthest objective away from their team. What would be like the decision process or your thoughts in your head that you'd have to go through when those kind of scenarios occur?
Okay, so I'll actually just voice out one real quick that comes off the top of my mind. Okay, so let's say I'm on security, because I already have the loadout for it and everything. So let's say I'm on security, and let's say that my starting position was balcony for this particular round. So from balcony, let's say that I get a kill from the first player that pushes apartments. So that's 1 insurgent dead. Let's say as I get that kill, let's say that my teammate that's over in tires or workshop, so over down in that area, let's say that I hear him say, "I'm dead, I'm down, he's pushing tires." If he's pushing tires, that means he can either come out on here onto what's called gay barrel, and he can contest Bravo immediately, or he can flank through our arches onto Bravo, or he can even flank all the way our street to Alpha. So let's say that me and my teammate, we were the last 2 standing, and I had 1 kill here, a teammate over on Alpha had a kill before he died, and then I got another kill on balcony, so I have 2 kills, and then another teammate of mine got a kill on their arches before dying from the previous enemy that pushed Alpha.
Right.
So I know that it's a 3v2. I know that there's 3 enemies versus me and my teammate. I kill the player apps, it's now a 2v2, and then I lose my teammate, so now it's a 2v1. From this position, because I'm on my half of the map, if I were to try to push Bravo by myself, I would more than likely get pinched both from the Alpha player and from the player that could be our arches. So the logical decision that I would make would be I would still want to be focused on getting the objective, because if I have time to cap my team back in, I want to bring my team back in.
Right.
But it doesn't make sense for me to attempt to just hero cap Bravo, especially if it's perfectly neutral. So that means it's not blinking, there's no indication, like nobody has touched Bravo up to this point. So if I were to touch Bravo, the enemy team would instantly know not only where I was, but the player that was over here in A alley, he could push me. Like I said, I could get pinched from both my arch and A alley. Or an even worse situation is I could be on Bravo. So let's say I rotate down to Bravo and I start capping it and I focus, I play for arches. Even if this player that was in the A alley doesn't go for me, he goes for A itself. That then puts me under even more pressure, because as the time runs low, that means it'll be a 1v5 if I let them cap Alpha.
Right.
So again, and that's just the first thought that comes to my mind is if I've pushed Bravo right off the bat, I've already lost the round because it's a 2v1 and I don't want to lose main advantage. So my instinctual response would be to try and rotate and just make sure that no player directly went for Alpha. I wouldn't even worry about Bravo, because if they get on Bravo, I'll know exactly where they are. And from here, from this window position, if that A alley player that was in this area, if he hasn't made it to Alpha yet, and I catch him on the dumpster, on either dumpster really, or on tires, or maybe he thinks that I'm in Alpha and is running towards the front, I can catch him moving in that direction. So now it's a 1v1. So 1v1, now I can play a mind game, because the enemy team is going to call me out. I'm going to kill this player here. He's going to call out. He's balcony window side room. So that means that the other player is going to expect me to drop hull and go Charlie. So what I could then do is now I can hunt for that player. So I can then redirect, come back through balcony. I can check arches real quick, make sure he's not going for Bravo. I can check dark window, make sure he hasn't rotated up there to kill me as I leave balcony. And then I can come to upper ice cream. And again, I have another angle onto Alpha, because the logical position, the logical play, and from their point would be to either come kill me, in which case I'll either hear them coming, or I'll catch him as he's rotating out, or to go for Alpha or Bravo. So they're not going to go for Bravo for the same reason I'm not. There's too many angles to cover from the center, and in a 1v1, you want to bring your team back. So I would expect the enemy team to go for Alpha. Even though I killed one player over here, that side room over there doesn't give me good line of sight on my street. So the player that was over here in our arches, he'll come up and he'll run through security spawn, he'll play safe, and he might even run all the way through school, which will bring him somewhere around there. So he'll jump over that wall, or he'll just like sprint across the van here, jump through the car, and run straight into Alpha. So I would play for the kill, because if I play for the objectives from this side of the map, I have a much smaller percentage of making it to Charlie and capping my team back in.
So when would you play for the spawn camp? Is that kind of like a last ditch scenario?
So the only time that I play for the spawn camp is if I'm supremely confident in not only how my shot is feeling, because some people have different, they play differently in different servers. Ping does have a factor in how some players play. So if, let's say that same situation happens, I know it's a 2v1, and I know they're about to cap, and I'm close to Charlie, right? And I know that there's only like one other player left, and he's about to cap Alpha, and B is still neutral. What I'll do is I'll come over here on Charlie, and I'll bait it. So when you bait an objective, it's where you step on it, you make it start blinking, and then you step off of it. And in that situation, the reason why I would do that is because it would take, if they're already on Alpha, they're going to cap Alpha before I cap Charlie.
Right.
And if they cap before I cap, that means that their team will already be out of spawn before I'm able to cap my team back in, which means that even after I cap, they'll be in a position to spawn, kill, and reduce the success chance of my team getting to Bravo or Alpha, and I won't be able to do the same. So I'll bait the objective, make them think that I'm committing to the cap, and then I'll push forward right here and just watch their spawn. Because as soon as they spawn, they're going to run to Charlie to prevent me from bringing my team back in.
And I would say in this position, from my experience, most players end up running right down that corridor as well.
Because it's the fastest route out of Insurgent spawn to get to Charlie.
For sure.
But from here, like, you can't see me prone behind these barrels in these shadows. And if I get 2 kills here, and the other 2 players peel off to the flanks, I then just pull back a little further back to Charlie, kind of jump behind cover here, and then wait to see if a player comes here. I give it about 5 seconds. If they don't, then I might as well get on Charlie, because they're going to be too slow, getting out of spawn, and I'll be able to cap my team back in. So at this point, I'll either play a position like here, where I can see them running here, I can see if they come up to drop hull, and if they get on the point, I'll hear them if they come behind me, because these are the only 2 entrances, or, from right here, obviously, but these are the only 2 entrances that they're going to most likely enter.
Right.
So I can play right here, cover this side, know that they're probably not going to get behind me, and then if Charlie gets blocked, it narrows down the options to where if I flick up, there's nobody behind me. That means that they're back here. They're back here in the side room. And if I have a grenade left, well, instead of a smoke, this would be a flashbang. But I throw that flashbang in there, boom, full flash, free fire, and then I cap my team back in.
Right.
So, like I said, I would spawn kill, because I wouldn't be able to save my team. I wouldn't be able to get in position to rescue my team from being spawn killed themselves. So I'm killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I'm reducing their kills by not giving my team a spawn so that they can kill, and I'm also putting them at a disadvantage, because after I spawn kill them, I cap my team back in, and we have a numbers advantage.
Right. So in terms of resources and that sort of thing, what's the best way for a new player that wants to get competitive to start? Should they just join, let's say, the Insurgency Gym, or is there anything that you've seen before specifically they should read? Any channels, any Twitch channels, that sort of thing that they should follow to try to learn about competitive?
I would say that it's a mixture of all of those things you stated. So there's quite a few prominent Twitch streamers out there that are in the competitive scene and regularly stream, both scrims and individual play alike. So people I can think of off the top of my head would be Gems TV, who represents one of the arguably the top team in North America right now. He plays for Armada and regularly puts out good content and good streams for new players and veteran players alike. Another player that comes to mind is Snailman. Snailman not only streams a lot of pickup games, but he actually live streams his own team's practice. He coaches and plays for his own team that plays in the league, and he's a veteran of, I think, 4 or 5, maybe even upwards to 6 or 7 seasons in the DGL, and he's always been a top placer. So there's a lot of experience to be found on Twitch. I myself tend to do a lot more pub stomping than scrims these days, but even I tend to live stream some pickup games as well as some coaching sessions. I myself coach 3 various teams right now. I coach a team called Cryogenics, which are a new old team. It's new roster, old team name. And then I also am coaching 2 very, very new teams. These teams are green. This is their first foray into any competitive game, and that would be the Squad 9 fire teams of Lambda and Epsilon. So I stream those guys as well. And going into the content, though, the Gym Discord hosts pickup games for both EU and NA and mixed. That's where you kind of learn callouts. That's where you go to work on your mechanical skill, your placement. It gives you a great idea as far as the pacing and what loadouts work and what loadouts don't. It's also a good community where in that particular Discord they have tips and tricks, they have maps and lanes and stuff like that. If you're looking for something a little more structured in terms of you want to compete, you want to be on a set team, the next step from there would be honestly joining the DGL Discord, where they have strat discussions, they have VODs and clips that are regularly played. Yep. There's a lot more teams that are recruiting. A lot of teams are recruiting, and a lot of players are looking to form teams. So it's really a good time. Like, there's so many different areas right now that you can pull from. There's YouTube videos. I know Gems has YouTube videos. He has Infiende has YouTube videos for the Europeans. There's so many options out there. Whatever platform you choose, there's gonna be stuff there, honestly.
Yeah, and I'll end up, when this goes out to YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube now, you can probably look below, and I've linked a bunch of accounts and links to the gym and the DGL and that sort of thing. And any of the guys that the quote has mentioned, they usually have YouTube channels as well. And there's a huge back history of, I would say like 4
Old
years
matches,
of matches and guides and that sort of thing. So if there's something specifically you want to know, let's say it's finding a config to make your system run better or faster for this game mode, or what the callouts are on specific map, you can probably go on Google and just search out for, let's say, market insurgency callouts, and you'll be able to find a map that describes each one of the areas that Quode was talking about early in the stream, and you can kind of learn it. I'd say it's easiest learning in game, but you kind of get an overview, so you get kind of the basics before you jump in there and try it. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, pretty much. You hit the nail there.
So in terms of like other like specific like tips and that sort of thing that people should know, what kind of like mechanics should people work on that work a lot better inside of this game mode versus some of the others? Let's say stuff like pre-nades or that sort of thing.
So pre-nades are kind of a subjective discussion, or sorry, they're an objective discussion. Different pre-nades work against different teams, and pre-nades refers to lethals and utility, so that could be flashes, smokes, or frags. There's so many different ones that have been used and not used and sometimes used, and that's more of a on team-to-team basis. But one thing I would highly recommend for at the mechanical level is, as a player, have a consistency with your what I like to call iron sight placement. So a lot of public players, when they run or traverse the map, they do a lot of this, or
yeah, that's
like
me.
They're looking up or looking down, or if they're aiming down sight, they're staring at the ground because they don't like the way their gun blocks their view, so they're aiming down at the ground, and then when they see somebody, they have to jerk up and try to hit that shot. It's what I like to call mouse centering, where you can even practice it with hip firing, but try moving your mouse as little as possible when it comes to vertical movement. So if you were to aim down sight, every time that I stand up or anything, my crosshair is pretty much at chest level, and even as I come around corners, my crosshair, sorry, I keep saying crosshair. My sights are never dipping towards the ground or the kneecap level.
Right. And
the reason for that is because if you're sprinting around a corner, right, and let's say you're used to aiming down sight, at around chest level if somebody was peeking, you know, stairs. If you're used to that, and as you round, you know, come up 2 stairs, you aim down sight, you're already aiming at a common doorway where players like to peek, which would be like right here, or specifically right here. So let's say they're not there. Let's say that you're running up these stairs and you pre-aim that, and let's say the guy peeks you from over here. It's much easier to flick that than to flick that. So it's a lot easier to go from left to right and just boom, 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 rather than to be down here as you come up the stairs and then have to, like, you know, jerk up and then to the right. You know, it's just basically reducing mouse movement. You want to be as smooth as possible when transitioning around corners. That's like the easiest mechanical tip I can give, because movement comes with just like working around the lanes. A common thing that competitive players like to preach is there are two modes of movement in this game, and that is sprinting and crouch ADSing. And the reason why is because when you crouch ADS, you make no footsteps and you're ready to shoot. Your gun is already brought to bear, and you know, if you're holding an angle, you want to be as quiet as possible so the enemy doesn't know you're there. And if you need to get somewhere, and you need to get somewhere quick, you don't want to be, you know, plodding forward like this, coming down the stairs, you know. If you need to get somewhere, you need to get on Bravo right away. You want to get up and you want to be sprinting and just launch off and already be on the point.
Right.
So those 3 tips right there, I think, will help pretty much every new player.
Yeah, I know for me, like, when I started out, I'm kind of like peeking every corner, and like you said at the start, and you're showing us, like, looking pretty much everywhere. But I've now kind of make sure that I'm looking down, especially the lane that I'm in, and kind of holding a little bit more steady. It feels like you should be checking everything all the time, but when you're doing that, I think that you miss, let's say, guys in windows, and like small guys, especially off in the distance, that you would otherwise see if you were holding your view a lot more steady. At least from my short experience playing the game compared to you guys.
It's a valid statement. That's another reason why when players are doing this number right here, where they're staring at the ground, you know, they're like moving around, they're like panicking, like they're moving from here to here to here to here. They're looking up there, looking over here.
Yeah.
And then they just get killed. Like as they get killed from right here, like a player that's in this arch, and they're just standing here looking at everywhere but that arch. Whereas if they would have just been holding this angle and scoot back a little bit and just kept committing to covering this area, they would have a chance of seeing somebody from there. And then, you know, you could have. I'm not saying you'd actually land that shot, because if you're staring up at apps and you have to transfer to somebody arches, you're more than likely going to die. But you have a better chance if you're committed, because it's a lot easier to change direction when you're not already committed to a direction.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Like
changing directions with your mouse is way more difficult than going from a stop to a move.
Well, I always consider it like kind of like the prone position when you do prone inside of this game too, where if you want to turn, like, you're not going to be effective for another like half second for you to bring up your sights and that sort of thing. It's even when you're standing up or crouching or whatever, as soon as you flick, it takes a second for you to orient yourself. And so if you're flicking around constantly, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to orient yourself quickly unless you are a super good player or a long-time player, at least from my experience being like a newer player.
Yeah. There's actually a little tip I can share right now. If you're in a prone position, like right here.
Yeah.
And like, as you can see, I can only move my mouse this far.
Yeah,
but
it's about 90-ish degrees. Yeah.
But if I tap the W key, I'm flipped. Completely flipped. I can now move like all the way. So I'm still, so like if I need to move, I just tap S, and I'm like, because you do that small little move with your body, you can actually, it increases the range of your circle. So you could theoretically do a 360 whilst prone, and you don't even have to like leave the prone position. Like, I'm just swiping and tapping S every now and again, and I'm able to literally just do like a 360 on the ground.
Super realistic.
Super realistic.
Yeah.
Total immersive.
Just break dancing in the middle of the map.
I just broke immersion for every single like tactical player out there. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I mean, we're kind of like well, we are like a tactical game, but it still is pretty arcadey in some aspects. Take aspects of like Counter-Strike or aspects of like Call of Duty with aspects of like more realistic games. So you're always going to get some weirdness and some trade-offs for gameplay versus realism, and we always have to make those. One thing I wanted to ask you, when somebody comes in, let's say, to the Insurgency Gym or one of these other areas and tries to get into play this game mode, what kind of like setup should they expect for, let's say, teams or pugs or that sort of thing? Like, what is that process like? Because it's different right now than it will be in Sandstorm, but for people that want to get into it now, what is that process like for setting up a pug and setting up a scrim and that sort of thing?
So the way that the pugs work, the pugs are literally just pickup games. So if anybody has played any other sport in real life, like basketball or football, it's the same kind of concept. You have to have 10 players to start, because obviously it's 5v5, so you need 2 teams of 5. Adds up to 10. Fair enough. So you join the waiting room. There's usually a lobby and a specific voice channel that is titled waiting room or pug waiting room. You join that. Once it fills up with 10 players, 2 people will volunteer to be team captain. And then they kind of just go back and forth and they pick players. They try to pick as balanced as possible. So the players that already have some recognition and have some renown and some standing with the gym or with the DGL and other players know of, those team captains are going to try to pick them first, because although it's a pickup game, you want the teams to be as balanced as possible, and the only way to do that is to try to pick the best players first. So, but when you join the waiting room, you'll eventually be picked for a team, and then your team captain will move you into the channel, and then from there, they'll decide on the map, they'll decide on the server, and they'll move down into the room and communicate that information with you. If it's a map where you don't know the callouts or the lanes on, there will be a brief time period before the match starts, before the pickup game starts, where they'll give you a video and they'll go over the callouts with you in game.
Yep.
And then you'll play it out, and it's kind of like a rinse, cycle, repeat sort of deal. And you gain experience by doing that, and as you start to pick up the maps and the lanes and the callouts, then you'll start understanding the communications that come into play, because that's really what the pickup games are for. It's to practice your movement on the maps, and then your response time to not only callouts but also to making callouts, because that's what a lot of this game comes to. It's not even necessarily about the mechanical skill, although that does play a factor. It's more about the communication and the understanding of where you can go.
And in terms of callouts, what are, besides the specific areas and positions, what are some of the most common callouts, like -1 and like that sort of thing? What information do you want to pass the teammates without, let's say, overloading comms?
So the philosophy for doing any callout is keep it simple, stupid. So say as much as you can with as few words as possible. -1 merely means that you got a kill. If you want to call out where you got the kill to help the team, you can do that. But the most common call out that you'll hear is -1. And then after that, you'll hear, I'm dead. in any form of dead. I died. I'm dead. He killed me. How? Any of those exclamations usually mean I'm dead. And that makes it easier for you to keep track of. So -1, I'm dead. And then there's one blank. And you just say where that player is. If you say there's one balcony, there's one their side apps, there's one prone on T2 on Bravo, like you're simply calling out where you hear somebody prone or where you see an enemy player. Those are the 3 main callouts. There are callout types, I guess. Your -1s, your I'm dead, and then your an enemy is here. Those are your 3 main callouts.
Right. And yeah, like when you enter, or when if you look up any of the games, you can go up and look on YouTube for any of the matches, like professional matches. Go to the DGL or that sort of thing to look at older matches, older DGL matches, or we'll actually start hosting the channel on this channel and start promoting them on our Twitter and Facebook. But if you go in and look at those, the comms for those are much different than the casting versions that, let's say, Quode or Snailman or some of the other casters will be talking about, because it's rapid fire in terms of the callouts and the positioning and that sort of thing. But if you're a new player, I would highly suggest asking as soon as you get in your first pug. Just say I'm new. Say I'm new, and what should I do, or where should I go? Because like it sounds bad, and people like you don't want to be like pegged as the new guy, but it's a lot better than kind of just sitting there on your own and dying on your own, and people get angry at you because they don't know that you're a new player. And we get new players in all the time inside the Insurgency gym and some of the other areas. So I think it's important to communicate to your team, especially if you're starting out, that you're a new player, and to get suggestions on where you should play or what you should say and that sort of thing.
Precisely. And that's something that a lot of new players don't like voicing. Also, if you don't have a microphone, it'll be a very difficult task for you.
Yeah,
I know there was always exceptions to the rule. We've actually had a deaf player that's actually played a pickup game in the gym before, and it actually went surprisingly well. He had keybinds for various callouts, such as "I'm down" in the team chat,
or that's awesome.
-1 in the team chat. So even though he was, deaf and had a hard time like speaking, obviously, he could still communicate. And so there are exceptions to every rule, but communication is the most crucial aspect of the competitive scene.
Yeah, there's only 5 of you, and there's not like unlimited respawns like other modes, so it's incredibly important to let people know where people are, because if you're down and you don't call out where that guy was, your team has no idea where that extra guy is going to be flanking in from, besides the position that you originally were at. So it's definitely a good idea to communicate as much as possible, at least from the scrims that I've watched and the pugs that I've watched and that sort of thing. So I think we've gone through a lot of the basic stuff, but because we've got a lot of like Sandstorm questions and that sort of thing in the chat. What kind of stuff are you looking forward to inside of Sandstorm, or what do you want out of Sandstorm in terms of like competitive modes and that sort of thing?
So I actually don't have the chat pulled up, so if I repeat something that somebody's already said, I do apologize.
Oh, that's okay. If they had a question, somebody in YouTube will definitely have 5 times that amount of questions. So
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I would say that the primary thing I'm looking forward to is the matchmaking system. I know that there was an attempt to get started with it here on Insurgency Source, and I know that the unranked servers were created, and that for a brief point in time, because I was a part of the competitive testing group, that there was for a brief time rankings based on it, but I'm not sure if those measurements for the ELO were ported over the Sandstorm. My hope is that the matchmaking system in general will be solo queuable, meaning that players will be able to join via the main menu. They'll be able to go to multiplayer. They'll be able to select playlist, competitive, and then even if the rank isn't visible, because one thing that I am curious about, I do wonder if hiding somebody's rank would help reduce in what I like to refer to as smurfing, what everybody refers to as smurfing,
right?
Where higher skilled players will intentionally pick up new accounts or play on a friend's lower ranked account and intentionally, play against lower tiered players just to either boost that account or just for, the shits and giggles. So those are 2 separate thoughts, but along the same train of thought, because I want the matchmaking system to have some validity to it. And that's something that a lot of other competitive players are kind of... I know that you guys haven't released any official information about that, but a lot of the competitive players are very keen on that. Yeah. And we will be looking for that come beta time, I assure you. And
I would say just based on my experience playing any game that I've ever played with matchmaking launches in a specific state, and it might work okay for the start, but it always evolves over time based on the needs of the community and what ends up happening inside that community. I know that I play some MOBAs and that sort of thing, and they have some insane matchmaking systems with degradation for not playing over time and that sort of thing. So I'm not we haven't announced all the specific things that will be inside of the matchmaking system and how it works, because quite frankly it's a little proprietary, but I would say it's something that will continue to adjust over time, so that that if there are specific problems or stuff like smurfing, we'll try to find ways to get around it, because it's important for us to people get into matches where they're playing against people with equal skill level. Right now there isn't really an outlet for people to be able to play like a game mode like Firefight without a long setup time, like you described, going to the gym, setting up a match, and getting into server with teams and that sort of thing. It's a little bit of a complicated process compared to just hitting a button and you're automatically matched with players. So I think eventually it will get a lot better, but it's something that will continue to need testing, and it will need testing and continued refinement even after launch.
That's a fair answer. I expected as much. And then I guess the next thing I'm looking forward to is the new game mode, which is, because I'm one of those few competitive players that I don't only play Insurgency for the competitive scene. It is my preferred game mode, but it's not the only thing I play for.
Right.
I'm very curious about the new game mode, which is going to be a little larger in scale, and I believe is the reason for the implementation of vehicles. Bless you.
Yeah, yeah. There's some big maps with vehicles in there. The capture the base mode is pretty cool.
That's what I think. That's the one that I'm most eager for, as in regards to just from a public stance.
Yeah, we actually did some testing on that inside of our closed testing the other day, and there was some pretty hilarious stuff that ended up happening out of that testing, and yeah, I'm actually a pretty big fan, because it's like a base, defend, and attack, and each specific like objective will do a different thing to the enemy team if you end up destroying it or taking that point. So it's interesting.
It sounds like an improvement to a very signature game mode.
Could be. But
thoughtful stroke.
Yeah.
Thoughtful stroke of beer. I'm just
but yeah, we've had a lot of people asking about like other game modes and that sort of thing, and we've got like our game modes kind of refined down to what they are right now. So if you're a big fan of, let's say, ambush or that sort of thing, it'd be something that we might consider after launch. But we kind of have those game modes locked in, and we're trying to get it to the point where we're refining it as much as possible, getting competitive players to come in and play 5v5 Firefight, get people that have played long time like pug matches, getting them to play some of these other larger scale game modes with more players. And I think it'll be interesting to get everybody's feedback on those specific modes.
And kind of as piggybacking off of that, actually, in regards to the game mode thing, and the very, very vocal skirmish and ambush crowds that are out there, I know that several members of the quote-unquote competitive skirmish community, as well as the competitive ambush community, are going to be watching this. How easy will it be for modders to implement new game modes? Because I've already said this to everybody that's like been complaining about it. If NWI doesn't do it, modders will.
Right.
And I just wanted to see if, like, I just wanted you to kind of confirm that for them and give them ease of mind.
I'd expect as much. I mean, that's why you make a game moddable, is so that people come up with new stuff, or they recreate their favorite stuff in a new game, and it allows developers to take the time to do the stuff that is going to affect, let's say, the most people, or is going to have the biggest impact on the game. So I would say, like, at launch, the bare minimum we're looking at is custom maps, if not more. It'll really depend on prioritizing that versus testing some of these other game modes and a polish and that sort of thing. But we really want to get it to a state where we have, in terms of modability, just like we had for original Insurgency, just because that's our background. I mean, we're a company that formed out of a mod, and modding's really important to us. The majority of our staff came from the modding community, so. Yeah, if it's something that we're not going to tackle, I would highly suggest that people start getting into game development and start trying out modding or mapping or that sort of thing. Because even for us, we end up hiring people from that community, and most of our staff are from that community. So it will be very.
Hear that, Outlawed? You hear that, Outlawed? This is for you, buddy. This is for you, buddy. All right, sorry. Personal shout out done. I know he's watching this.
Yeah, and Outlawed is, of course. Can you explain Outlawed's role in the community right now?
So, for those of you who aren't aware, there's actually an additional competitive mode that might be making its way into Insurgency Source here sooner than later. The ESGL, which is a league that's founded by the individual I just spoke about, Outlawed, he creates a custom theater where he hosts a 2v2 game mode. So kind of like Wingman, but he's done it in a very clever way to where it doesn't break Insurgency. It remains true to what Insurgency is and how it plays, but because of he's made slight alterations to the damage models and to various movement mechanics so that it plays a little more fluid and is a little more doable for 2 players, because obviously in vanilla Insurgency, you know, time to kill is very, very low. And with this ESGL theater that he's created in this, you know, plugin that he has, there's actually a lot of potential for more specialized, more focalized kind of gameplay if you're into that sort of game mode.
Right.
So and he has a Discord as well. It's the ESGL Discord. You can join that. There's lots of testing going on right now for the theater, and anybody's welcome to join.
Yeah, and I'll actually throw like a link for that at the bottom of the video as well. But yeah, I think that's going through like the basics of what I wanted to cover today. I wanted to get through all the basics on how the mode works and that sort of thing. And I think we'll continue on this series with Quode and with some other community members, looking at more specifics about specific maps and callouts and strategies as we move going forward. But I wanted to thank you for joining today, man. And do you have any shout outs or anything you want to plug?
I mean, obviously, I'm not gonna selfishly plug myself because, you know, I shamelessly plug myself on Steam. And
honestly, your Twitch address has been on the screen for like 90% of the episodes.
Precisely.
So that helps, yeah.
It helps a lot. But I do want to give like personal shout outs just to the DGL admins in general, as well as the gym admins. I mean, without those 2 organizations, I don't know where competitive Insurgency wouldn't exist in the state that it's in right now, were it not for those 2 orgs. It's been completely community ran, completely community organized. There's been no there's been a lot more support from New World, and I as like a community member want to thank you guys for, you know, kind of giving that support back, you know, especially as we're going into the new game, getting started with that. I want to give New World a personal thank you and shout out for that, because there's a lot of older vets that are probably going to come back for Sandstorm, and the hunger, I think, is going to be a lot more intense to enjoy competitive and to play it. And thanks to the DGL, the gym, all the players, all the teams, all the admins, and New World for supporting it. I think I'm so hyped for Sandstorm. I don't think hype is the correct word to encompass my emotions, and and if there were like, there's not enough take my money memes out there to like cover how like my passion for the game. So
yeah, I've seen all the take my money memes at this point. But yeah, and like you said, big shout out to the community for running the competitive community the last few years. Something I definitely want to continue to promote coming up, especially as we get closer and closer to Sandstorm, because if we want to continue growing the game, having a top tier level of players that people can look up to and kind of mirror is really important. So yeah, I want to thank you for coming on and for doing all the casting and all the streams that you end up doing, and definitely go check out Quode's channel. Go check out all the links for the stuff below if you're watching on YouTube, and yeah. Hopefully you end up learning something today, but we'll continue to revisit that, and we'll do some content wraps and that sort of stuff you'll see in-game in the in-game menu as well. So thanks to everybody for joining, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks, guys.